I smiled at his brother. Then the Alpha King pulled me away and bit me in front of everyone. The moon hung low over the city, silver light spilling across cobblestone streets and gilded rooftops. Lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, casting flickering shadows that danced like whispers of old secrets. Tonight was the Festival of Shadows, a night when humans and supernatural beings came together under strict rules, their alliances as fragile as crystal. Alara walked through the marketplace, her heart pounding with both excitement and unease. She had been raised among humans, yet she had always felt a strange pull toward the mysteries of this city. Her golden hair glimmered under the lanterns, and her green eyes, wide with curiosity, scanned the crowd. There were whispers about the royal Lycan family, whose members ruled over this city with strength and fear. The Alpha King, Kale, was the most feared among them. Rumor said his bite could bind a person's soul, a mark of both danger and desire. Even from afar, his presence made people tremble. Alara tried to ignore the tales as she wandered past stalls of glowing crystals, strange spices, and enchanted trinkets. She smiled politely at the merchants, careful not to draw attention. Yet, fate had a way of twisting even the smallest actions. A sudden movement caught her eye. A young man, tall and graceful with soft silver hair, bowed slightly as he offered her a flower that glowed faintly in the moonlight. It was Lior, Kale's younger brother. He was known to be charming, kind, and dangerously clever. For a moment, Alara's lips curved into a shy smile. The gesture was innocent, meant only to return kindness. But in that instant, a shadow fell across her path. Kale stepped into view, his dark cloak flowing like liquid night. His eyes, sharp and commanding, locked onto hers. The world seemed to narrow, every sound fading except the rapid beat of her own heart. His presence was magnetic, terrifying, and full of unspoken power. Without a word, Kale reached for her arm and pulled her away from Lior. The crowd gasped. Lantern light glinted off his fangs as he leaned close, biting her hand, not violently but with undeniable authority. A mark burned briefly, a touch of fire against her skin. Alara staggered back, shocked and humiliated. The festival's music and laughter felt distant, as if the world had tilted and left only her and the Alpha King. She met Kale's gaze and found something unexpected, a flicker of vulnerability hidden behind his commanding facade. I didn't mean anything, she stammered, trying to free her hand. Kale's lips curved into a shadow of a smile. It doesn't matter what you meant, he said in a low, velvety voice. The mark has chosen you. Confused and frightened, Alara stared at the faint mark on her hand. She had heard stories of the bite, how it bound one's soul, how it signified a connection that could not be broken. And yet, she could not deny the strange pull she felt toward him, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something deeper she could not name. Lior stepped forward, concern etched on his face. Kale, she is not part of this world. Yuka, Kale's eyes flicked toward his brother, sharp and protective. She is part of what matters now, he said coldly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Alara's heart pounded. The festival, once a place of wonder, now felt like a cage. Everyone's eyes were on her, the humans, the Lycan nobles, even the servants who hurried through the shadows. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and strangely alive. Kale released her hand but did not step away. Instead, he stood close, his dark eyes studying her as though he could see through her very soul. Alara felt her pulse quicken. There was danger in him, yes, but also an intensity she had never known. "Follow me," he commanded softly, and before she could protest, he guided her through the winding streets and into the quiet corridors behind the festival. The city's noises dimmed, leaving only the whisper of the wind and their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Alara finally found her voice. "Why me?" she asked, trying to keep it steady. "I don't understand. Why now?" Kale's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "I don't fully understand it myself," he admitted. "But something in you, it calls to me, and that call cannot be ignored." She shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. There was an undeniable truth in them, one that frightened her more than anything else. She felt as if her life had changed in a single heartbeat, and yet she did not know in which direction it would lead. Suddenly a chill swept through the corridor. Elara turned, sensing movement in the shadows. A figure, cloaked in black and half hidden in darkness, watched them silently from above, its eyes glinting like sharp stars. Kale tensed beside her as though he, too, recognized the danger. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice a protective growl. Elara's heart raced. The festival, the bite, the strange pull toward Kale, it had all led to this moment. She felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. The shadowed figure moved with impossible speed, disappearing before either of them could react. Yet the threat remained, lingering in the air like smoke. Elara looked at Kale, who now seemed more human than terrifying and yet more dangerous than ever. His fangs were visible, but his eyes held something she could not name, a promise, a warning, a longing. What is happening to me?" she whispered, clutching her hand. The mark burned faintly, reminding her of the bite, of the claim, of the connection that now bound her to this Alpha King. Kale's voice was quiet but firm. "You will learn," he said, "and when you do, nothing will ever be the same." As the first rays of moonlight slipped across the castle towers, Elara realized that her life had been forever altered in a single night. The festival, the smile at Lior, the bite, it had all set into motion, a chain of events she could not yet comprehend. Her eyes widened as she glanced back toward the shadowed corridor. The figure had returned, more visible now, its form twisting in the lantern light. It was watching her, and Kale. Its intentions were unclear, but one thing was certain. Danger was coming, and their world would never be the same. Kale's hand tightened briefly around hers, not as a warning but as a silent promise. "Elara," he murmured, his voice almost a caress, "whatever comes, we face it together." And in that moment, under the cold silver moon, Elara understood something profound. She was no longer merely an observer of the Lycan world. She had been pulled into its depths, marked by the Alpha King, and touched by forces that could change the very fabric of her destiny. The wind whispered through the corridors, carrying a warning she could not ignore. And above, the shadowed figure waited, silent, patient, and knowing that the bite had begun something far larger than either of them could yet see. The festival was over. The night was only beginning. The castle loomed above the city, black stone walls glowing faintly under the moonlight. Inside, its corridors twisted like veins, full of shadows and secrets. Elara followed Kale silently, her hand still tingling from the mark he had left on her wrist. The crowd's whispers from the festival had faded, but the memory of the public bite haunted her. Every noble's gaze had burned into her mind, yet none of that compared to the strange pull she felt toward the Alpha King. Kale led her into a chamber at the heart of the castle. It was vast, with high arched ceilings and tapestries depicting battles and legends of his ancestors. Candles flickered along the walls, casting soft, dancing light. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, uneasy in both body and spirit. "Sit," Kale repeated, his voice calm but firm. His eyes studied her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "You are mine now, Elara, not by force but by destiny." Elara swallowed hard. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? I'm just a visitor, someone who smiled at your brother by mistake." Kale's lips curved, almost a smile but shadowed by something deeper. "It is never a mistake when fate calls," he said softly. "You carry something in you that even you do not know, something powerful, something necessary." Her pulse quickened. The bite had marked her, yes, but Kale's words suggested more than possession. They hinted at destiny, a path she had never imagined walking. She looked down at her wrist. The mark had faded slightly but still tingled with heat. From somewhere in the chamber came a soft shuffle. Alara turned sharply and saw Lior, the younger prince, leaning against the doorway, concern etched on his face. "You can't just claim her like this, Kale," Lior said quietly. "She doesn't belong to our world. She's human. You're dangerous," Kale interrupted, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority and warning. He stepped closer and the candlelight caught the sharp angles of his face. "I know, but I also know she is the key, and nothing will stop what must happen." Alara felt her heart pound. She looked from Kale to Lior and back again. Both brothers exuded power, one dark and commanding, the other gentle and protective. Both seemed to care for her in different ways, though Kale's concern was wrapped in fire and dominance, while Lior's was soft but unwavering. She felt torn, confused, and strangely alive. "Enough," Kale said finally, turning back to her. "You will stay here tonight. You are safe, though not entirely free. The castle is full of eyes, and not all of them are friendly." Alara nodded, unable to speak. She had expected fear, perhaps anger, but the mix of fascination, dread, and curiosity overwhelmed her. That night, the castle was alive with quiet whispers and rustling footsteps. Shadows moved along the halls, flickering candlelight revealing glimpses of statues and paintings that seemed almost alive. Alara lay on a guest bed, the mark on her wrist aching faintly. She could not sleep, not with the memory of Kale's gaze, the tension of the festival, and the uncertainty of her own destiny. A soft knock on her door startled her. She rose cautiously. "Who is it?" she asked. "It is I," came Lior's voice. I just wanted to make sure you are safe." Alara hesitated but opened the door. Lior stepped inside, closing it quietly behind him. "You must understand," he said. "Kale, he is not easy to read. He is powerful, but he is also bound by something older than both of us. You have been marked, yes, but he does not know the whole truth either." "What truth?" Alara asked, curiosity mingling with fear. "The bite, the mark, it is more than a claim," Lior explained. "It binds you to him, yes, but also to the curse he carries. That curse isolates him, controls him, and yet it can be broken. I think you might be the key to that." Alara's mind swirled. A curse, a mark, destiny. Her ordinary life had been replaced with a world of shadows, magic, and ancient power, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the corridor outside. Lior stiffened. "Stay here," he whispered, stepping toward the door. Before Alara could react, Kale appeared, his presence filling the room like dark sunlight. His eyes were sharp, dangerous, and unreadable. "She is mine to protect," he said to Lior, his voice firm but not cruel. "Leave before I regret it." Lior nodded, but the concern in his eyes did not fade. "I only hope you can keep her safe," he murmured before leaving. The moment the door closed, Kale stepped closer to Alara. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of desire, fear, and something unspoken. She tried to step back, but her body betrayed her, moving closer as if drawn by some unseen force. "Do you understand what this means?" Kale asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "The bite of the mark, it binds us, not just in body but in fate. Our paths are now tied together." Alara's hands shook. "I don't know if I can." "You will," he interrupted softly, but with a weight that brooked no argument. "And I will guide you, protect you, even if it costs me everything." She stared into his eyes, seeing both danger and vulnerability. Something in him was broken, yet something in her stirred. She could not explain it, but a spark of connection ignited, a fragile, trembling thread between their souls. The castle seemed to sense the tension. Shadows shifted along the walls and the air grew colder. A soft whisper echoed, almost like a warning brushing against her ear. She turned sharply, but the hallway was empty. "The shadows, they watch us," Kale said, noticing her fear. "Not all are friendly." "You must trust me, Alara. Your life depends on it." She nodded, unsure if she trusted him or even herself. Yet despite the fear, she felt a strange thrill. The pull between them was undeniable, magnetic, and terrifying. Days passed. The castle became her world. Kale was both distant and close, harsh and tender. He trained her in ways she did not understand, teaching her to move silently, to sense the magical currents of the castle, and to read the intentions of those around her. Every lesson was tinged with danger, every glance charged with emotion. Lior would visit occasionally, offering small gifts or gentle advice. Each time, Kale's gaze would darken, a warning Alara felt deep in her chest. The tension between the brothers mirrored the storm within her own heart, torn between loyalty, curiosity, and a dangerous attraction she could not name. One evening, Kale led her to the castle's highest tower, where the moonlight poured in like silver fire. "Look at the city," he said. "All of this, the power, the fear, the loyalty, it is ours to protect. But protection comes with sacrifice. And you may have to sacrifice more than you know." Alara's heart raced. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" Kale's eyes softened just slightly. "The bite, the mark, it is only the beginning. There are forces that will test you, test us. The curse I bear, it is not mine alone. You are bound to it now, and it will demand much of both of us." A sudden movement in the shadows caught Alara's eye. A figure, dark and elusive, watched from the far corner of the tower. She felt a shiver run through her body. The shadowed figure from the festival had returned. Kale's hand tightened around hers. "I see it," he said quietly. "It has followed you. You are not safe even here." Alara's pulse quickened. The castle, the brothers, the mark, they were all part of a world she did not yet understand. And yet, despite fear, despite confusion, she felt a strange certainty. She could not turn away. She was tied to Kale, to his curse, and to the shadow that now lingered just beyond reach. Kale leaned closer, his fangs glinting faintly in the moonlight, but his eyes held more than threat. They held promise, protection, and something far deeper. "Whatever comes," he whispered, "we face it together." The wind howled outside, carrying whispers from the city below. The shadowed figure moved again, silent and patient, waiting for the moment to strike. And as the moonlight bathed the tower in silver, Alara realized that her life had changed forever. She was no longer merely a visitor in this dangerous world. She was marked, bound, and drawn into a story far larger than herself, one of desire, danger, and destiny. And the shadows were only beginning to stir. The castle lay quiet under the moonlight, but the silence was deceptive. Shadows shifted along the stone walls, curling like living creatures, and the wind whispered through the towers as if carrying secrets from faraway lands. Alara moved carefully through the corridors, her wrists still tingling from Kale's bite, a faint glow lingering over the mark. She had grown used to the sensation, though it still unsettled her. Kale walked beside her, silent, his presence heavy and commanding. Each step he took seemed to carry weight beyond the stone floors. He had not spoken since they left the tower, but Alara felt the tension radiating from him. She understood now that the bite had done more than mark her. It had tied her fate to his, entwining their destinies in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. "Alara," Kale finally said, his voice low and measured, "you must learn to sense the currents of power that flow through this castle. Not everyone here wishes you well." She glanced at him, hesitation in her eyes. I think I am beginning to feel it. But it is confusing and sometimes it frightens me." "That fear is natural," he replied. "It is part of knowing the truth of what you are. The mark binds you to me, yes, but also to the curse I carry. That curse can corrupt or protect, depending on strength and will." Alara's thoughts turned to Lior, who had warned her about Kale's curse. The younger prince's gentle concern had offered her comfort, but now, walking with Kale through the castle's winding halls, she felt the pull of something far deeper. Kale's power was intoxicating, but it was also dangerous, like a storm waiting to break. They entered a chamber she had never seen before, a vast hall filled with mirrors that reflected not only her own image but shadows and light she could not explain. Kale stopped in the center, gesturing for her to look around. "This is a place of reflection," he said softly. not just of the body but of the soul. Here, you can see the connections between yourself and the world. You can see what others cannot. Alara stepped forward, cautiously touching one of the mirrors. For a moment it seemed ordinary, reflecting her face in the flickering candlelight. Then a shadow moved behind her reflection. She spun, but no one was there. Kale's eyes darkened. "It is the shadow of the curse," he said. "It watches, waiting, it tests, and it learns. You are not just marked, you are sought after by forces that wish to control or destroy you." Her heart raced. "Why me? Why am I part of this?" Kale took a step closer, his voice gentle now. "Because you are strong, Alara, stronger than you realize, and because the curse, it senses you. You have a power that can bind it, control it, or even break it." Alara shivered at his words. She had always felt ordinary, human, and fragile. Now Kale spoke as if he had seen something in her that even she could not understand. For a moment, their eyes met, and the tension between them was almost unbearable. She felt drawn to him, a pull that was frightening and thrilling at once. His presence was overwhelming, commanding yet protective, dangerous yet tender. Before she could speak, the hall's shadows shifted again, and the familiar figure appeared, the one who had haunted her since the festival. Cloaked in black, its form twisted and unnatural, it moved silently, circling the room as if testing them. Kale's hand shot out, gripping hers tightly. "Do not leave my side," he ordered. "It seeks to divide us, to manipulate. We must be stronger than it." Alara nodded, her pulse racing. The fear was sharp, but so was the thrill. She realized she could not deny the connection she felt with Kale, not now, not ever. The bite, the mark, the tension, it all bound her to him in ways she did not fully understand. Suddenly the figure lunged, vanishing into the shadows before either of them could react. The mirrors around them shattered with a soft crash, fragments glinting in the candlelight. A chill ran through the room, and the air seemed heavy, almost alive. Kale's eyes blazed with determination. "You must stay close," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Whatever it seeks, it will not separate us, not if we remain united." Alara's hand shook as she held his. She felt a warmth from the mark on her wrist, a pulse that matched her own heartbeat. The bond between them was no longer just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and terrifying in its intensity. The shadow figure retreated, but its presence lingered, like smoke clinging to the edges of the hall. Alara realized that the bite had done more than bind her to Kale. It had awakened something within her, a power she had never known, a connection that neither of them could ignore. Days turned into nights as Kale trained her in the ways of the Lycan world. He taught her to move silently, to read the currents of magic, and to sense the intentions of those around her. Every lesson was filled with tension, every glance loaded with unspoken meaning. She learned to anticipate danger, to trust her instincts, and to understand the strength that lay within her. Lior visited occasionally, always cautious, always concerned. His presence was a reminder of the life she had left behind, of the human world that no longer seemed entirely hers. Each visit brought conflicting emotions, comfort, guilt, and an undeniable stir of longing that only complicated her feelings for Kale. One evening, Kale led her to a hidden garden within the castle walls. Moonlight poured over the marble fountains and flowering vines, casting silver shadows that danced like spirits. The air smelled of night-blooming flowers, sweet and intoxicating. "Look around," Kale said softly. "This is a place of calm but also of reflection. You must learn to see not only the shadows but the light." Alara inhaled deeply. For the first time she felt a sense of peace, however brief. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Kale's eyes softened as he stepped closer. "So are you," he said quietly. The words sent a shiver through her. She looked up at him, her heart racing. The danger, the power, the curse, they were all present, yet in that moment she felt something entirely different. Something like hope. Before she could respond, a sudden noise broke the serenity, a rustle in the nearby shadows. Alara spun, but there was nothing visible. The shadowed figure again. It had followed her even here. Kale's hand tightened around hers. "It will not harm you, not if we are together," he said. "But we must be ready. The bond between us, it is more than a mark. It is a link. It can protect or it can destroy depending on how we wield it." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of his words. The pull between them was undeniable, a mixture of desire, fear, and trust. She realized that the bite had changed everything, not only her connection to Kale, but her understanding of herself and the world she now inhabited. The wind whispered through the garden, carrying the shadow's presence like a promise of coming trials. Kale drew her close, his eyes intense, yet gentle. "You are mine to protect," he murmured, "and I will not fail you." Her heartbeat matched his, a rhythm that felt both terrifying and comforting. She knew that their bond was no longer just a mark on her wrist. It was something deeper, something that could not be broken. The shadow figure moved again, closer this time, lingering at the edge of the garden. Its intent was unclear, but its presence was undeniable. Alara felt a chill, a warning, and yet a strange anticipation. Whatever came next, she would face it with Kale, bound by bite, by destiny, and by a connection that neither time nor fear could sever. As dawn approached, the garden was bathed in silver light. Alara looked into Kale's eyes and saw not only power and danger but something rare: vulnerability, trust, and an unspoken promise. The world beyond the castle was uncertain, filled with shadows and threats, but within the garden, for a brief moment, they were united, ready to face whatever trials awaited. The shadow figure watched from afar, silent and patient, knowing that the bite had begun a chain of events that could not be stopped. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the marble fountains, Alara realized that nothing in her life would ever be the same. She was no longer just a human girl who smiled at a prince. She was marked, bound, and drawn into a destiny that would test her courage, her heart, and her very soul. The shadows were rising, and the bite that bound her to Kale was only the beginning. The shadow had been waiting. Its presence lingered like cold smoke at the edges of the castle, twisting through corridors and across stone walls, watching, patient and silent. Alara felt it before she saw it, a creeping awareness that chilled her bones. The bite on her wrist pulsed faintly, reminding her of Kale, their bond, and the power they now shared. Kale stood close, silent and tense, his dark cloak brushing the floor. The Alpha King had always been commanding, but now there was a vulnerability in him, a shadow of fear and concern he did not often show. His fangs glinted faintly in the candlelight, but his eyes, dark and brooding, were fixed on her. "Alara," he murmured, his voice low, almost a caress, "whatever comes, stay close. The shadow cannot touch you if we face it together." Her pulse quickened. She had learned much since the festival, how to move with stealth, sense danger, and trust her instincts. But this was unlike anything before. The shadow was older, stronger, and cleverer. Its energy seemed to twist the very air, darkening corners and silencing even the wind. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. She knew her heart was in more danger than ever, but she also knew she could not run, not from this place, not from Kale, not from her own destiny. Kale's hand found hers, gripping tightly. "Together," he said simply. And in that one word, Alara felt the weight of everything that had led her here: the festival, the smile, the bite, and the countless nights of learning, fear, and longing. The shadow emerged from the darkness, its form twisting unnaturally, black as night and shifting like smoke. It had no face, no recognizably human shape, yet it radiated intelligence and malice. Alara took a small step back, but Kale's presence beside her was steadying, anchoring her. "You cannot hide," the shadow hissed, voice echoing through the hall. "The bond is mine to sever. The mark is mine to claim." Kale stepped forward, his voice booming, full of authority and fire. "It is not yours," he said. "You do not control this bond, it is ours together, and you will not take her." Alara felt a surge of warmth from her wrist, where the bite's mark pulsed like a heartbeat. Something deep inside her awakened, a strength, a courage she had not known she possessed. She stepped forward, joining Kale, and the shadow recoiled slightly, as if sensing her power. "You are stronger than you realize," Kale said, his hand brushing her shoulder. "You can help me control this. Together, we can end it." Alara closed her eyes and focused, drawing on the energy the mark had given her. The connection between her and Kale was more than physical, it was spiritual, binding their essence together. She could feel his thoughts, his fear, his determination, and it gave her courage. The shadow hissed, advancing, and the room grew colder, darker, the very stone seeming to bend under its presence. Kale's fangs glinted, his power rising in response, a silent growl vibrating through the halls. But he did not act alone. Alara reached out, her mind and soul connecting with his, and together they sent a pulse of energy toward the figure. The shadow shrieked, twisting, faltering, but it was not finished. It lunged again, faster, smarter, stronger. Alara felt the fear claw at her chest, but Kale's grip, steady and firm, reminded her that they were bound by more than bite. They were bound by trust, by understanding, by destiny. "You must trust yourself," Kale said, his voice low and urgent. "And trust me." Alara nodded, summoning every ounce of courage. She let the energy from the mark flow through her, joining with Kale's strength. Together, they pushed forward, a beam of silver and gold light radiating from their bond. The shadow screeched, twisting and shrieking as it tried to resist. Then, with a final burst of energy, the shadow evaporated, leaving nothing but silence and the faint scent of night air. The castle seemed to exhale, the oppressive darkness lifting, and the cold in the stone walls softened to warmth. Kale lowered his hand, breathing heavily, but his eyes found Alara. For a long moment they stood in the quiet, feeling the aftershock of the battle. Then he reached for her, lifting her hand to his lips. The mark glowed faintly, then faded, leaving a warmth in its place, a symbol not of fear but of bond and trust. "You were magnificent," Kale said quietly. His usual commanding tone was softened, almost vulnerable. "I could not have done this without you." Alara smiled, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and awe. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I felt you beside me, and somehow I felt strong too." Kale's hand lingered on hers, and for a moment all the shadows, curses, and danger faded. In their place was understanding, connection, and something far deeper than either had expected. Days passed, and the castle's corridors, once filled with tension, now carried a sense of calm. The bond between Alara and Kale had deepened, not just through the mark or the bite, but through trust, shared trials, and the understanding that they were stronger together. Lior visited one final time. He looked at them both, concern still lingering in his gaze, but also relief. "I see now," he said softly. "You are no longer alone, Alara. Kale, you have found someone who understands, who can face the darkness with you." Kale inclined his head slightly, a rare softness in his expression. "She has always understood more than anyone," he said. Alara's heart lifted at the words. She realized that the journey had changed her. She was no longer the uncertain girl who had smiled at Lior at the festival. She was marked, tested, and transformed. She had faced fear, shadows, and destiny, and had survived. One evening, under the silver moon, Kale led her to the castle balcony. The city stretched out below, quiet and peaceful. Lanterns glimmered like stars, and the wind whispered through the towers, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers. Kale stood close, his hand brushing hers. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "There will always be shadows, there will always be danger, but now we face it together." Alara looked up at him, her heart full. She could see the weight he carried, the loneliness he had borne for centuries, and the hope that now glimmered in his eyes. "Then we face it together," she said, matching his tone, her voice steady and clear. The bite, the mark, the shadows, they had tested them, bound them, and transformed them. But in the end, it had also given them something rare: trust, understanding, and a bond that neither time nor darkness could break. As dawn crept over the horizon, spilling gold and pink across the city, Alara and Kale stood side by side, watching the world wake. For the first time, they felt not fear but strength, not isolation but connection. The castle, once a place of shadows and danger, now held warmth, laughter, and promise. Their bond had been tested, their courage had been proven, and the shadows that had haunted them had been pushed back, at least for now. And as the sunlight touched their faces, Alara realized that the story of the festival, the smile, and the bite was not the end. It was the beginning of a legend, one of trust, love, courage, and the power to face darkness together. Kale turned to her, eyes soft, lips curving slightly. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we will face it as one." Alara nodded, a smile lifting her lips. As one, the shadows had risen. They had tested, challenged, and threatened. But together they had endured, and together they would endure all that was yet to come. The city, the castle, and the moonlit night seemed to hold their breath, as if recognizing the power of the bond that had been forged. And in that moment, Alara and Kale knew no darkness could break what had been marked, tested, and redeemed. The moon shone brightly, silver and eternal, and the wind whispered across the towers, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. They had faced the shadows. They had survived, and now together they were unstoppable.